So you did a Twitter thread today, and you talked about Bernie's closest advisor, his campaign manager in 2016, Jeff Weaver, who was still writing press releases for Bernie as of Monday of this week, is starting a super PAC. It was just mind-blowing. But here's the Twitter thread that you put out. So let me just read. I'm just going to read some of it. You did like 30 tweets. I think I have like 8 or 10 of them. You say Jeff Weaver is also the guy who convinced Bernie and Jane to start taking billionaire money at Our Revolution in August 2016. So now Our Revolution was the organization that Bernie set up to push for progressive candidates. I was there, meaning you. If I and the rest of the staff hadn't walked out in protest, they would have gone ahead with it. That's why we resigned. The worst part is that Jeff Weaver, again, Bernie's closest and longest advisor, wanted to use the organization's 501c4 status to take billionaire money without telling grassroots donors about it. All the while continuing to sign every email and piece of merchandise with paid for by Our Revolution, not the billionaires. Asking millions of poor and working class people who had just poured their heart and soul into the Bernie campaign to give more while not telling them we were taking billionaire money on the side is one of the worst things I've ever been asked to do. So, are you saying that the people working at Our Revolution were being asked to not disclose that they were taking billionaire money and actively lied to their own supporters by saying we're not funded by billionaires? You were saying that the Bernie Sanders organization wanted you to do that?
It wasn't as explicit as you just put it, but it was implicit. It was basically... and so going back to kind of like June of 2016, we knew that Bernie had lost the nomination. He wasn't necessarily going to make a big push with the superdelegates. But we also knew that, we had gotten word that Bernie was going to form a kind of, organization to continue the political revolution, push for down ballot candidates, the organization, which would become Our Revolution. And so, at the time, there was kind of a power struggle of sorts between people on the campaign who were kind of more career Democrats, and they kind of work on campaign to campaign. They've done it for a long time. And then people who were kind of, true believers of Bernie's cause, of, who is going to staff this organization, who's going to run the organization. And actually those people who were like true believers in the cause, won out on that fight and ended up staffing Our Revolution. For the most part, it was people who like really believed in Bernie's message. And so, we were very happy and we thought Our Revolution's future was really promising at the time. But there had been some troubling things that had happened kind of in the lead up to the creation of Our Revolution. And so, there was an immediate kind of deliberation about, when we decided that there was going to be an entity, Our Revolution, created, like, what is that? What is the legal status of that entity going to be? And there's different advantages to different legal statuses. And so, the two that kind of were in contention was a 501c4, which is what it ended up becoming, which doesn't have to, it can take as much money as it wants from individuals, and it doesn't have to disclose donors. And so that's why sometimes they're called dark money groups. And they have no donation limit, and they can spend as much as they want for candidates with independent expenditures. And then the other was a PAC, a political action committee, which would allow us to spend less per candidate. There's a $5,000 maximum. But it would allow us to actually build a network of the candidates because PACs are allowed to coordinate directly with candidates. And our Revolution's mission was going to be all about supporting down ballot candidates and building a network. And then, whereas the C4 you're not allowed to communicate with the candidates in any way. And so, the staff thought, well, obviously it should be a PAC because what we're looking to do is we're looking to coordinate and communicate with the candidates. Now
that's different. Now that's different than a super PAC.
Exactly.
So you were setting up a political action committee, not a super PAC.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But then, but for reasons that we couldn't understand, Jeff Weaver was arguing for it to be a C4, and he convinced Bernie and Jane to make it a C4. And it was kind of like, it was very perplexing to those of us on staff because we said, wait a minute, we literally can't fulfill the mission of the organization if it's a C4. We can't talk to the candidates. So we can't build this network that we're looking to build, but they insisted on it. And, so, it was like to the point where it's like, some of us were pointing out like the statute, like, here, look, it says it right here, like in the law. But the reason for that was something that we found out later. It was that Jeff, with Bernie and Jane's agreement, had wanted it to be able to be a C4 so that they would be able to take essentially money without disclosing the amounts. Because what Jeff got to work to immediately after it was formed, and which was no secret to us before it was formed too, was trying to essentially reach out to billionaire donors to give to Our Revolution. And this was part of the debate that happened before Our Revolution was formed. And we were shocked to find out, those of us who were going to be on staff, when Jeff started saying that he thought that we needed to take money from Steyer and Soros, because we thought, hold on a minute, we just waged a campaign where our success and our integrity was entirely premised on not taking big money. Like, why would we turn? And it was explosively successful. We defied all expectations. Why would we turn around and start taking that money now?
Right.
Yeah.
You raised hundreds of millions of dollars from grassroots supporters, proving that's the model for progressives going forward. And immediately after the campaign's over, Bernie's top closest advisor decides, let's start taking billionaire money. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it wasn't. And that was bad enough. But it got even worse because we learned that because then the C4 part made sense, because then it's okay. You wanted it to be a C4 because you wanted to take this money without actually informing the grassroots donors who were going to continue giving to us, who were continuing to give in large numbers. And so it was disproving the very rationale, and so Weaver's rationale in his case to Bernie and Jane was that Our Revolution isn't going to be able to raise enough money to support down ballot candidates in a political revolution unless we start taking money from the billionaires, and those of us on staff, we said, but hold on a minute. We just proved that that's not true. And we think that that's going to hold true. We'll continue raising good amounts even after the campaign is over. People will still be committed to it. They won't just like vaporize, the movement won't dematerialize. And so Jeff was so determined to start taking this big money, though, that he actually went as far as I kind of say in the thread at one point. He went as far as to actually sabotage the grassroots fundraising.
So let me get to that, Nick. Let me show. So you tweeted out some conversations you were having with people about this, taking the billionaire money inside. And so here you tweeted this out. Let me read it. Without discussing it much, you and I and others who left when you left Our Revolution have been shielding Bernie Sanders in public. We've cut the blame off at Jeff and made excuses for Bernie. I think that to an extent, we're all protecting the legend because we know what it means to the people who gave so much of themselves to it. We know that people desperately want to believe in the existence of such a principled leader. It gives them hope and it gives them strength. So so that's kind of a big statement that you were putting the blame on Jeff Weaver when the blame really also belonged on Bernie Sanders, but you were doing so to protect the feelings of his supporters, not necessarily him, right?
We did it all to protect the movement, because it occurred to us, what are people going to think? I mean, like, circumstances are a little different now. People are a little more critical of Bernie, and that's a good thing. But like, if those of us who kind of, worked or volunteered on that campaign, if you can take yourself back to that mindset, I mean, Bernie he was a transcendent figure. He had this like halo of incorruptibility, and he meant so much to people.
Yes, I was one of them. He meant a lot to me.
Yeah, me too. And he still does, but it's in a different way.
Yes.
It's kind of, it's exactly. But Bernie, he,
let me show this. You said Jeff Weaver sold Bernie and Jane on the notion that they would need to take money from billionaires because grassroots funding wouldn't be enough to sustain our revolution, and we couldn't unilaterally disarm. Weaver was so determined to take big money that he went as far as to sabotage our revolution's grassroots fundraising in an effort to make his prediction that we needed billionaires a self-fulfilling prophecy. Jeff leaked the announcement of our revolution in July 2016 before it was legally incorporated and able to accept donations, costing us millions of dollars. When the organization still raised millions after incorporating and disproved him anyway, he disregarded it. So what you're saying is the way he tried to undermine our revolution was before our revolution was even allowed to take donations, they weren't incorporated yet. He announced the formation of it, which kind of takes away the fanfare of an announcement because now it's announced, it gets press, people go to donate, they can't. So you're saying he did that on purpose to undermine, so you couldn't raise money, so then it would shore up his point, see, we need to take billionaire money. You're saying that he intentionally did that? That's what you're saying?
Yes. He intentionally sabotaged the launch of the organization so that it would end up raising less money and end up proving him right in the debate with Bernie and Jane on needing the big money.
So
and it was estimated by our finance folks that we lost $3 million that way.
That's amazing. That's an amazing statement. That's an amazing
money
statement.
That could have gone to candidates.
Yes, yep. You go, as horrible as this is, it's just scratching the surface of Weaver's repeated sabotaging of the 2016 campaign and profound disrespect for the progressive movement. I could write a book about it. But the most disappointing part is that Bernie and Jane went along with it and still listened to someone who is so clearly a corrupt establishment Democrat at the expense of this movement and the millions who are counting on it. I've been trying to tell people this for a while, that Bernie's got horrible people at the tippy top of his campaign, and he's got them there on purpose. And this is exactly what I've been talking about. Jeff Weaver. The most disappointing part is that Bernie and Jane went along with this corruption. And they still listen to this guy. He's still putting out press releases. He's still speaking on behalf of Bernie Sanders and his campaign. As of Monday. So then you say, realizing that even someone as unique and principled as Bernie could be made to conform to the Democratic Party and take big money is a big reason that I left my career in the Democratic Party and set aside my own financial stability to help start the movement for a people's party. So that was really it. That was the last straw for you when you were working at Our Revolution and Jeff Weaver and Bernie and Jane all decided to take billionaire money?
It was shocking. Yeah, it was a very shocking experience. It was
Did you feel
like,
betrayed?
sorry.
Did you feel betrayed?
I felt like Bernie didn't understand what the movement had been about. Like, I felt like he didn't understand himself the power behind the movement and what he had unleashed. Like, it was just it was so difficult to wrap our heads around. The idea that the same man who was going around and talking to tens of thousands of people every day in different cities about how we needed a political revolution and it needed to be free of corporate and billionaire money, and contrasting with the Wall Street speeches that Hillary Clinton was giving, that this could be the same person, that the same person could agree to taking billionaire money and not understand. Like, I think that was probably the most shocking part to me, was the lack of comprehension that Bernie seemed to have on what this was going to do to the progressive movement and the way that it was going to devastate it.
And so what people, I don't know, we've reported it on this show. So what happens was at Our Revolution, when this came down and Bernie endorsed it, taking billionaire money in the dark and not telling people, you organized, was it 9 of the 13 people who worked at Our Revolution to actually walk out of the organization, right?
Yeah, I brought it up with other staff members and I said, this isn't right. And we all kind of agreed. And we had a staff meeting and we decided, we need to confront Bernie about this. And we did. We told him that, and he wouldn't budge, unfortunately. He said that he thought we needed the money. And Weaver was already out there, trying to solicit money from Steyer. And so we said, well, we would rather resign than be a part of this. And that was kind of the last resort. And we did. And it was disappointing too, to know, we were trying to show Bernie how important this was to us, to the 9 of us who stepped down out of the 13 total staffers. And it was disappointing to see him choose against that, essentially, and so he essentially chose to stay on the path that Weaver had charted. And the people who were there originally at Our Revolution, these were 13 people that had been picked from a staff that was at 2,000 at one point, so these were people who were really, really talented and really dedicated, I mean, some of the most incredible people I've ever worked with. And for Bernie to kind of have that decision in front of him, like, on the one hand, we could not take billionaire money, like the whole campaign says and the literature says, and keep all of my staff, like the best people who, I like picked to come work here. And on the other hand, we could take billionaire money and like go with Jeff. And it's like that he would pick that. It was, it was incredibly disappointing and it was very disillusioning.
When I found out about it, don't have heroes. Every day I get that same lesson of my life is don't have heroes because they will always let you down. And it's kind of jaw-dropping. Let's go back to some more stuff you said. So in this Twitter thread that you had today, you said, no one goes into the Democratic Party and emerges further on the left. Boy, that's such a truism. Every institutional pressure in the party moderates elected officials and reels them into the mainstream. The Democratic Party blocks most progressives from getting into office, and the few that make it through are then dependent on the party for their power, privilege, and career. Boy, have we seen that play out with AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ro Khanna. It's amazing to and it's just amazing. And Bernie, Elizabeth
Yeah.
Warren, Sherrod Brown. It's amazing to see them go along with the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. It was stunning. So that's what you're saying has happened has just happened to them, and it's continuing to happen. And we keep pointing it out. And now slowly, other progressive news shows are also starting to call out the Squad and Bernie for being complicit with the corporate giveaway and the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of our country. And you know why? Because they are complicit. And so you go on to say they have to befriend neoliberal committee chairs and party leaders for committee assignments and to get their legislation heard. They have to horse trade with moderates. Which is why AOC, none of them will call out Nancy Pelosi, and which is why Bernie won't call out Chuck Schumer. That's why. And until they do that, nothing will happen, which is why nothing is happening, which means that they're not nice people. They're self-interested career climbers, including fucking Bernie. Bernie's looking out for his committee assignments. His own press secretary said, or surrogate said that he ran his campaign from a point of view of I want to keep my senatorial appointments, committee appointments, not from I want to win this race. So that's self-interest. That's not Bernie being nice. That's what people got to get over. This isn't about Bernie just doesn't understand he needs to fight more. Bernie doesn't fight more because he understands the consequences and he doesn't want them. He doesn't want to be like Ralph Nader. He doesn't want the wrath of Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, or the establishment. He really doesn't. Am I right about that?
It's true. It's true. And I go on to kind of identify some of the other institutional forces. And so I don't know if you planned on
Here, I'll show them. You say they have to spend personal time with and win votes from the establishment Democrats who were easy to criticize from the outside. These dynamics quickly take the edge off their critiques of the party and their colleagues, and it waters down their messages and platforms, which is why you'll see AOC wave her arms and scream about the stimulus bill while voting for it, and also at the same time saying it's a joke and an insult of a bill, but I'm not going to call out anybody who votes for it. Those two things are incongruent, and they show exactly what Nick is pointing out here. That's exactly what has happened to AOC already. She's going to scream and rail against the Republicans, but she'll never scream and rail against Nancy Pelosi or the other Democrats who are actually the people she has the influence over or on. You go on to say that's why Bernie almost never, and this is a fact, ask Tim Canova, that's why Bernie almost never supports primary challenges against incumbent Democrats in Congress, and why even AOC is backing away from creating a corporate-free caucus in the House and supporting the primary challenges she said she would 2 years ago. So Cenk Uyghur's already calling out AOC for this kind of bullshit. I've been calling her out for it for a while. Now you're calling her out. I hope other progressive shows start calling her out for it, because this is exactly the opposite of. So now people like AOC won't even back now. So let me throw it to you, Nick. This is what. So this has been evident with Bernie for a while. I just didn't see it, and now it's obvious for the entire squad and Bernie Sanders himself that this is actually the case, that they've been. Well, let me see. No, you say you don't. You don't change the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party changes you, right?
Yeah, that's just it. Is that, as much as we can criticize, and this is something that I really wanted to share with folks on your show, is that I think that for a long time there was kind of there was like a vow of silence. I've heard Chomsky use that term before, around criticizing Bernie and around criticizing, other members of the progressive movement, but particularly him. And I think that now that's changing. I think you played a large role in that, Jimmy, and I think that's, frankly, something that the movement is, really in your debt for, because it's not healthy. It's not healthy to me. You know, like change and improvement and growth as a movement requires introspection. It requires us to think about what's working and what isn't. It requires us to hold each other accountable. And if we're not doing that, then we're stagnant or we're repeating strategies that just don't work, you know? And so this doesn't mean that, you know, necessarily like pointing, you know, critiquing an action of someone. People can be so black and white. And, you know, it's critiquing an action that someone takes doesn't mean that you hate them or that you oppose everything that they stand for or that you don't want to see them win. I would like to see Bernie unsuspend his campaign.
Me too.
And, you know, and replace Biden. But I can hold that simultaneously, not, you know, mutually exclusively, with the criticisms that I have of him and his campaign. And I believe that other people should be able to do that for him, for AOC, you know, for the other members of the squad, for other people who are with us where, you know, where we disagree with them or where we think that they aren't living up to, you know, to the ideals that the movement embodies. And that's how we produce change.
You don't produce change by making excuses for people doing the wrong thing, and for not calling them out. And Bernie it's funny. Bernie's the one who tells people like me, hold my feet to the fire. I have the videotape of him saying that. And don't listen to me. You should listen to yourselves. I have the videotape. And now all of a sudden in 2020, you're irresponsible if you don't listen to him. And I guess we're not supposed to hold his feet to the fire. I don't know what's going on. So now, because of this, you're making a push for a third party, and it's a movement for a people's party. And here's a stat you tweeted out about America's views on the need for a third party. In your view, do the Republican and Democratic parties do an adequate job of representing the American people, or do they do such a poor job that a major party is needed? And so the dark green is the people who want to say a third major party is needed. It's somewhere around 60% of the country says that. And it's somewhere under 40%. Under 40% of the people think the Democrats and Republicans do a good job. So an overwhelming majority of people think the two parties do a horrible job, and an overwhelming majority thinks we should have a third party. The point of Bernie staying on the ballot is twofold. What part of it is that he wants to get delegates so he can have a pretend influence on a platform that has absolutely no influence on anything. So it's just a charade. 100%. And anybody who tells you that the Democratic platform matters a bit is either a fucking idiot or a party hack. That they're just an idiot or a party hack, because the platform has absolutely no effect on anything. It never has. It never will. It's never gonna. So anybody who tells you that Bernie's staying in to get delegates so he can influence the platform is straight up fucking gaslighting you. And if Bernie tells you that, he is also gaslighting you, just like when Bernie gaslights you to say that Joe Biden is the answer to our problems right now. A demented guy who's to the right of Trump. Bernie's lying to you when he says that because he's protecting his own position. So he'll lie to you. And he's doing it right now. Is that too strong of me to say, Nick, that Bernie's lying to you when he says you should vote for Joe Biden? Because he is actually lying to you, because Joe Biden is a demented right-winger who's worse. Go ahead. Let me throw it to you.
I think Bernie knows better that Biden really is not going to change. I think that, I'm, you know, even if he was willing to change, I don't necessarily see I haven't seen from Bernie that he's willing to do what it's necessary to make him change. Bernie's staff recently had to petition him openly just to keep the organizing operation going. You know, this was kind of one of those Our Revolution moments for me. I was like, holy shit, the staff are like engaged in this fight with him, just like just like we were. And it's like, it makes so little sense. And I just don't understand the rationale behind it. Like, so Bernie built up this amazing organizing apparatus during the campaign, and if you're going to suspend the campaign, it seems like there's a lot of other worthy causes that could, that you could continue to organize around, like maybe, mutual aid, or a rent strike, or a general strike, or a new party, or, even according to whatever you're trying to do, Bernie, helping Biden, or down ballot progressives. But like the idea that you would kind of let it languish or disband it, or that you wouldn't even, or that your staff would have to like ask you to move it back to our revolution is like, I thought that was a given. Why do like hundreds of staffers have to sign a letter telling you to keep your organizing going? You said you were going to be the organizer in chief, so like even if Biden was movable, as far as Bernie, I don't see him taking the steps that would be required even to move him. Because if there ever was a time to be organizer in chief, it's now, during a pandemic, during a global financial meltdown, when a third of people couldn't pay like their rent, when there's bread lines forming across the country, is like, if there ever is a time to get progressive issues like moving, it's now. And, I don't see him like engaging to the level that's required.
Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?